evening, good morning, and good afternoon to everyone tuning in to serve as your 2025-2026 ASUCI Elections Commissioner. I'm from Aldrich Park After Dark, sought resources and programming through events and conferences to advocating for students at the university, local, state, and national levels. ASUCI is entirely student-led. Everything our student government does to make UCI a better campus for anteaters is made possible by the incredible student leaders who join them every year, some of whom you will be voting for next week. Voting will officially begin on the elections website, elections.uci.edu, next Monday. Students, regardless of year, major, immigration status, etc., are entitled to vote in this year's elections. Devices and refrain from any distracting or disrupting the candidates on stage. These debates are being live streamed by New University and across from the Emerald Bay Ballroom. An intermission tonight. Since round of applause as they enter the stage. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. Each candidate for 1 rebuttal per question. Each candidate will have the opportunity to offer a occasion per rebuttal. At the front of the audience, a member of the Elections Commission will provide hand signals to indicate how much time a candidate has left. A C will indicate 30 seconds, and a 10-second countdown will be provided. Candidates may ask the moderators to repeat the question once, and it has to be before they begin their response. All candidates have reviewed and agreed to the rules from each candidate, starting with candidate Summer.
In immunology, and I'm running for president not because I really want to have the advocate for students as I have done this past year. Thankfully, I've been in academic jurisdiction. I'd like to expand my ability to serve the students in a more general sense for basic needs for campus safety. Going to politics later on after UCI, students listening to what they ask for, supporting increased resource accessibility, something that within my 1 year in ASUCI, and I'll admit at the beginning I didn't really know what ASUCI was or how it worked, and I plan to continue doing that as president. Thank you.
Hey eaters, my name is Gabriel Mutsvangwa. I'm a political science and economics double major here. Like many students, one of my first memories of UCI was during SPA, being in a brand new environment. But our anteater community opportunity and forced us to confront the real issues experienced throughout our campus. Security, or the real struggle to feel safe and protected on our campus. These issues affect far too many within our anteater, but are also directly implemented into our campus affairs. And that's exactly why I'm running your voices as we navigate these challenges in our campus community. I plan to partner with our numerous resources to create open communication. Thank you.
Thank you for your understanding of the role of ASUCI President. We will begin with
Officer of the association. They help manage to delegate responsibilities to ensure that the association's policies to action, to deliver a platform where students can bring their concerns directly to our student leadership and our university administration. One of the privileges of the ASUCI president is that they get to meet regularly with the campus and learn from, but are also implemented into everything the campus does throughout the.
The role of the president is first and foremost the advocate for the students. They are the face of the association, if anything. Essentially, the president is representative of the entire student body, regardless of in every room that they are in. Essentially, what they also do is they do manage an entire team, and what I've been able to see this past year, I've been able to manage an office of my own as an exec. I've been able to collaborate with other members of the other branches, and I plan to do the same if I am elected as president, to advocate for students collaboratively so that things get done efficiently and effectively.
Our next question tonight is, given the pool of candidates running in this election cycle, why are you uniquely qualified for the position of ASUCI President?
Like I mentioned previously, this past year I have served as an executive in ASUCI. That means I've been having these conversations with administration regarding campus safety, basic needs through admin luncheons. I've been meeting with departments regularly, and they all know me by name. They all know me very well. And I've been able to build these relationships in my past roles, not only as academic affairs vice president, but also as a commissioner. My last year as campus climate, I've been able to work closely with UCIPD, the International Center, and like facilities management, the background knowledge and the institutional knowledge that's required to succeed in this role, especially because I've been in these rooms having these conversations, and a lot of the work that has done this year needs continuity, and ASUCI, in order for it to function, needs longevity in its plans. So essentially I want to, what I know of what has happened this past year, and continue that on.
I think one thing that differentiates me from my opponent is not only my experience, but my results with that experience. As an at-large senator, I have the privilege of meeting with students all throughout campus every week, if not every day. And they tell me the big issues that they're facing. Whether as a student system, as a part of the UC Council on Student Fees, I get to work directly with the Board of Regents and the UC Office of the President to ensure that your tuition remains stable, to pass policy, to ensure that our financial resources are accessible, but also as an executive vice chancellor to allocate $250,000 to keep student programs funded, to protect student programs, but also to increase the access that we have to them. Moreover, I serve as the current local and state affairs here to increase student advocacy and student opportunities, but also to ensure that these resources that they have are stable and accessible for the entire student body. Finally, last year I served as the seat at the table identity coordinator, where I was able to defend DEI programs and ensure that they remained funded in that position.
What do you believe is the most important issue to the student body, and how would you address it as ASUCI president? Candidate Gabriel, you may begin.
I think one of the biggest things that students tell me straight up is the lack of accessibility to their financial specialists, and also the instability that we currently have amidst rising prices. You know, I talk to students every day, and as a student who relies on financial aid, this hits right at home. As ASUCI president, I plan to collaborate and accountability for financial aid delays. I also want to propose a position within OFAS for them to create a position for first-generation students to allow them to make informed financial decisions as they transition into higher education. Finally, I want to publicize our ASUCI budget reports. You know, every student pays more than $150 into our budget. I want to ensure that they're represented in every single financial decision that we make.
I think that if you don't feel safe on campus, if you don't feel safe to leave your home, safe to get groceries, you really can't do anything. I think that is what is first and foremost in my mind, is that students feel supported by the university, that they're able to go and learn, they're able to go to class, and just their overall status in this country. And I think that's something that affects everyone, regardless of where you are, where you're from, is safety. I think students need it's the university's responsibility to make students feel safe, and IPD, as well as centers, know how to support students in keeping them safe and making them feel supported, because it is the responsibility of the university.
Next question for tonight is, what specific experiences have impacted and inspired you to run for ASUCI president? Candidate Summer may begin.
I think that there is a lot. I think that when I started at the university, I wasn't really super interested in student government university. The longer I saw that there were problems, I have had a lot of roommates in the past who have cried to me about enrollment issues, about their concerns of them paying their rent, of them being able to get an apartment, for them being able to get food. And I have seen how the university has failed so many members of my community, and it really frustrates me when people are struggling and it feels like there's nothing you can do about it. So honestly, through my role this past year, I've learned that there is something UCI, through my conversations with everyone that I meet, I always hear something new, something that shouldn't be happening. And I honestly think that students shouldn't have to worry about housing or food or just like their overall safety if you're a student here. It is the university's responsibility to support students, and I aim to do that if I am elected as president.
Well, one of the specific experiences that actually comes up to mind when I think about this question is one of my colleagues. She's a student parent, around the same age as my mother, as a child, just my younger brother's age. And I think about her experience. How can she raise a child while also gaining education? And I think about the conversation that I've had throughout campus with many students. No matter the major, no matter the background, we have a lack of access to many of these resources, a lack of awareness on where to go when we need those resources. And what I plan to do as the ASUCI president is not only publicize and promote those resources, but also ensure that those resources can go to where students are at. You know, one of the biggest things that I've noticed over the past few years working on all systems and all levels for UCI from a passion and a common vision. And I believe that my experience not only has shown that vision, but has shown results, direct policy, when it comes to advocating to expand our notification services so that students not only feel safe, but are aware of emergencies when we're on campus. I plan to continue this advocacy as ASUCI president and continue listening and learning from student experiences directly.
Moving on to questions about the responsibility of the ASUCI president. The ASUCI president is the only undergraduate student who regularly meets with the chancellor. What items would you agendize for your first meeting with the chancellor?
UCI PD is held accountable and accessibility to those resources, understanding when emergencies happen on campus. I want to change the mindset. Rather than telling students to come to our events, I want to go to them. I want to understand their concerns and listen to them. One of the biggest things that I'm thinking about, ensuring that financial aid is kept stable and that our students have accurate and accessible assistance to supplemental resources to aid them, to allow them to focus on their education as opposed to the stresses of it.
I would bring a couple things up to the chancellor. First and foremost, I would bring up campus safety. I do as much accountability for it. In fact, this past week I had a meeting with UCIPD about it, and we are still in discussion, but I'm actively meeting with UCIP to discuss it. I know how they sound like when they're lying to us. I know what to stand for it, to be honest with you. That meeting was frustrating, and essentially because I've been in these rooms, I know how they act, I know their excuses. I will aim to continue Basic Needs Center, insurance, or the chancellor's on the same page as I am with my agenda for the upcoming year in terms of student accessibility, how UCIPD fails to make students feel supported. Like I said before, I've been in conversations with them, not only as an exec, but also the year prior.
On to our next question. The ASUCI president serves as the liaison to the UC Regents and the UC office hitting with these bodies. Candidate Summer may begin.
I think something that I would bring up is one that affects, or first and foremost, I would bring up the individual issues that UCI experiences, and then see SB 98. Communication. It's something that every UC school has struggled with. As an executive member, I've been able to be in conversations regarding SB 98, advocating for students, as I have done this past year. I know exactly what is going on this campus, what has been happening in these rooms for advocacy, and essentially I plan to continue that work, continue to hold UCIPD accountable, and that not you are documented or undocumented. At the end of the day, it's a matter of feeling safe, and that is what matters at the university.
The Board of Regents on the UC Council on Student Fees, we see many of these issues come up as well. When it comes to the SB 98 ledge, I've not only worked in the Senate to showcase, and that is something that I want to continue to do as ASUCI president, something that hits close to home. I'm the son of two Irvine. That's scary. It not only affects our student community, not only affects individual students, but it affects our larger student community as well. Something that I also want to bring up is the protection for student rights and the permanent protest. That tells you something. And we need to ensure that student rights are consistently protected. That's what I've been currently doing as the local and state affairs, but also to ensure that they're uplifted as well, and that student rights are showcased in the legislation passed, and also in the policy implemented by the Board of Regents and the UC Office of the President.
For our next question for tonight, how will you collaborate with the other offices, such as the ASUCI Senate? Candidate Gabe may begin.
One of the things that I plan to do, as I just mentioned, is continue our advocacy for the protection of student rights. I plan to work alongside the External Vice President's office to ensure that students on campus. I also want to work with the Associate Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to find equity gaps within ASUCI and the larger campus to ensure that every single student community feels represented in the resources, policies, and initiatives that we implement and facilitate. I also plan to work alongside the Office of the Associate Vice President of Academic Affairs to increase access to students' class registration times, or actually the no pass deadline in order to drop a class. I actually had a conversation with a student in engineering the other day, and I want to ensure that we not only push for an extended drop date, but that we
This past year, I have been working with schools for their schools. I've worked with the president and EVP regarding SB 98. Like I said earlier, I've been in these rooms having these conversations. I am not making statements. I am making plans, and I am executing them in my role. Essentially, for the next year, I plan to continue my collaborations with every member of ASUCI, essentially with Senate. Something that I've done this past few weeks, I've been meeting with everyone that is running to just ask them what their plans are and how I would be able to support them. Because at the end of the day, we ought to work as a united body, because that is how you get things done, and that is what I've done this past year. With the AVP of DEI, I would work with them in regards to if there's anything that they cannot get done alone. But as academic affairs this past year, I will continue working with them on a drop policy that they are negotiating with right now in terms of offering courtesy drops for students. And I plan to work with IVP on ensuring that everyone and ASUCI knows how it operates, and it operates efficiently.
The ASUCI president often coordinates with their counterpart in the associate graduate students, the Graduate Student Government Board. Candidate Summer may begin.
As access to food, access to general resources on campus, and safety overall, again, with SB 98. GS and admin luncheons, I have worked with them previously. I know how they operate, and I plan to continue that line of communication, that line of collaboration, and being our agendas overlap, and to essentially utilize that overlap to ensure that to ensure that admin knows what issues students are facing, and to ensure that we get things done quicker and effectively.
Well, I have the privilege of teaching at the UCI School of Law, working with law students, and as the Vice Chancellor of the Student Fee Advisory Committee, I get to work with graduate and professional students from all backgrounds to understand the issues that they face. I agree with Summer. I think we need to expand basically its resources. For many students throughout our campus, whether graduate or undergraduate, there's a struggle to access those resources. Many don't know which links to click or where to go. And I want to ensure that each student throughout our campus is given ample access to understand their rights, but also to practice and exercise them without the fear of being discriminated against, without the fear of being persecuted against. I also plan to work alongside them to expand emergency assistance and aid. So many students I've talked to, they struggle with periods of financial insecurity. They may not know if they will have a roof over their head tomorrow, or a place to sleep, or a meal to eat. We need to ensure that for both graduate and undergraduate students, that these resources are not only accessible to meet them where they're at.
The ASUCI president serves on the UC Council of Presidents, a governing body composed of all the UC student body presidents. From an Irvine perspective, what issues and solutions would you propose?
I think that we can take some great action and create some wonderful policy to expand financial aid access throughout the UC system, working on a system-wide University of California system. I think we can jointly create that effort. And we can also do really well to expand basic needs resources. Extra supplemental nutrition assistance program for students. That's something that we can not only implement here at UCI, but throughout the UC system to ensure that students have access to those basic needs resources.
Candidate Summer?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
The ASUCI president serves on the UC Council. From perspective, what issues and solutions would you propose jointly advocating for that would have an impact on the UC system as a whole?
I think that there's a lot of issues to bring up. Something I've been saying throughout all my answers. Bill, I think that that is something that students should. Furthermore, I do agree that basic needs accessibility does need help across the board. To the UC to the Council of Presidents, just because it's something that would be particular to UCI, not affect the UC system as a whole. But I do think that basic needs accessibility is something that ought to be advocated for. In regards to other resources such as like health resources, I think that's something that should be advocated for. Students should have access to adequate health care, although the UCI system differs. I would like to advocate that other universities kind of look at it, do the same, and relay that back to the president.
Executive officers of ASUCI and redefine existing ones to best fulfill the needs of the undergraduate student body. What positions, if any, would you propose? What positions, if any, would you redefine? Candidate Summer may begin.
Something that I've focused on a basic needs coalition, much like the one that we have currently this year. But something that would differ would be I would want a campus affairs director, one role, because there's so much overlap between these two roles. I think that it's easier for administration to have one point person to talk to, but it's also easier in the long run to not have to relay the same messages back and forth to the same two people over and over instead of having one point person on that. I think that there is so many infrastructure issues on campus that need to be solved, like, for example, the lack of mirrors in the parking structures, the lack of security cameras in parking lots and parking structures, and the issues with lighting and the issues with automatic doors. I think that it should be one person advocating for that in conjunction with to advocate for finances, a food security, housing security, as well.
That I would revise would probably be the financial wellness coordinator. I want them to do more and be able to achieve more under their current position. Work with OFAS not only to increase transparency and accountability, but to ensure that we're adequately targeting the students who need those resources the most. One thing that I plan to do as ASUCI president is propose positions or policies to ensure that our first generation students are represented in their transition towards higher education. And one position that I would continue to propose would be a resource center coordinator. There's so many resource centers, wonderful resource centers. Resources need to be not only made aware to the student body, but also made accessible. I want to ensure that that coordinator is able to communicate effectively with each of the resource centers to ensure that students have access to this, but also to implement initiatives where we can bring that access to them.
Sometimes the undergraduate student body has expressed overall feelings of disconnect between the student body and the student government. This concern may be attributed to the association's lack of visibility, lack of or ineffective outreach strategies, and or perhaps a lack of resources. The following is a three-part question. What do you believe is the biggest factor to this overall feeling of disconnect and distance between ASUCI and the undergraduate student body? What strategies do you intend to implement and utilize in order to rebuild connections? Candidate Gabe may begin.
Well, as an outdoor signer, I get the privilege of meeting with students every week, if not every day. And I always ask them the question, how can ASUCI support you? And many students tell me, I don't know what ASUCI does. And I believe that's a way in which we can not only bring policy to increase belonging, is to go to where students are. And that one of the biggest ways we can do that is social media. Ensure that not only what we're providing is accessible, but also is made or the language is made easy and accessible for all students to understand throughout our campus. We can also launch initiatives throughout each schools, although we're switching to an at-large senator campus's schools to ensure that every school's issues or potential initiatives can be addressed. Yes.
Oftentimes, the undergraduate student body has expressed overall feelings of discouraged strategies and or perhaps a lack of resources. The following is a three-part question. What do you believe is the biggest factor to this overall feeling of disconnect and distance between ASUCI and the undergraduate student body? What strategies do you intend to implement and utilize in order to rebuild connections?
Like a bunch of like little different circles, essentially. That's how it's super important. That's why I'm here. I'm super passionate about student government. But I think that what ASUCI can do for these students is to kind of be in their bubbles, be in their circles, whether it be boothing on Ring Road, showing up to their club meetings and just reaching out, emailing, and maybe even social media campaigns too. But I think being there where students are already present digitally is something that is so important. That's what I've done this past year. I've shown up to people, I've gone to offices to ask, hey, like talking to them on Ring Road, being like, hi, sorry to bother you, do you know what ASUCI is, etc., etc. And that's what I did last year when I was campaigning. That's what I've done throughout my whole year. I reached out to at first and they got back to me, and I've been working with them throughout this year, and I plan to do the same. I plan to take advantage of the fact that we have a comms officer and a comms office.
And areas would be at the center of your discussions with the undergraduate student body. Candidate Summer may begin.
Wait, sorry, could you say it again? I think that there is so much. I think it depends on the student. First and foremost, I usually ask like, oh, like what year are you? What major are you? What is something that kind of irritates you just a little bit? At the Basic Needs Center, when I talk to them about health service, there's a lot of frustration with financial work. I've been working with OFAS this past year in my role, and I plan to continue being clear communicators with them. And with student safety, again, SB 98 is one that concerns such a large portion of students on campus, and usually the answer is, I don't really know. And because I've been speaking with UCIPD, I know how they act. I know.
One of the topics that I would bring up that would be the center of my presidency would definitely be financial advocacy. We've seen over the past few years an inaccessibility to access many resources and to get a specialist. And many students tell me, they call the financial aid office, and unfortunately they're unable to get in contact to understand and make informed decisions regarding their finance. I want to ensure that is accessible, but also is inclusive to every single student, no matter the background or demographic. I also agree, basic needs is something that I would bring up as well. So many students tell me, whether they're in an RCO, the resources it provides. And I believe we have not only a duty, but a way to actually showcase those resources and to partner with the Basic Needs Center and the numerous resource centers that we have throughout campus to ensure that students understand where they're at. Regarding campus safety, I want to expand the emergency notification services when immigration enforcement is on campus. We want to also make sure that the legislative language that we're using is accessible. Many students may not know about what SB 98 entails, and I want to ensure that they have access to that information, but also understand how we can mobilize and make an effort to change that. One final thing, I plan to work with our numerous departments to expand our resources, expand the Anteater Express to include later hours so that students studying during exam season can get safe access to transportation.
How will you increase and spread awareness of the significance of ASUCI, as well as its staff and
Thank you. I think one of the ways we could do this is to actually build bridges between our communities. I agree, so many campus communities throughout our great campus may exist within a bubble. We're able to promote our resources, but not only that, listen and learn to their experiences. And that's exactly what I've been doing over the past few years, whether in the ASUCI Senate, working for the Student Fee Advisory Committee in collaboration with the Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor, but also on the greater UC level, ensuring that student voices, digitally and physically, go to where students may be, whether that's in engineering hall or enrollment hall. We're going to ensure that students understand ASUCI, not just as a student government, but as
Can you repeat the question, sorry?
and resources to a wider range of students.
I think that there's a lot that can be done for marketing for ASUCI. I think that is what catches people's eyes, but also just showing up and saying, hi, I can do this, 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 and this. Which one do you care about? Is there something that I missed that you are being affected by? In my TAs, I've spoken to about every part of the campus. I have learned so much from everyone, and I've been able, through my role, to speak to students there. But that's what I learned is you have to be there where they already are. You have to meet them where they're at, and that's not always online. That's not always through a video or through a reel or through a post. It's sometimes just showing up to a meeting and say, hey guys, like I'm working on this, this, and this. I feel like you guys would care a lot about this because it affects you directly. What do you think I should do? What do you think would be best? How do you think it would most benefit you? And to advocate for ethnic studies and more inclusivity in education within my role. People that I've honestly never met before, but essentially in my
Both of your campaigns center basic some items and resources, in your opinion, that classify.
I think that, but something else that I'd like to touch on is health. I wish it was super nice and super awesome, but it's not. And essentially, our emergency support is to receive what but I want there to be more support in health resources. So that students have access to anonymous, low-cost health and wellness essentials, including emergency do anything if you're not healthy. But beyond that, in terms of basic needs, so that students know who to talk to, and they
basic needs resources. Just a couple months ago, told me left, right, and center how successful that workshop community. Moreover, when it comes to basic needs, I want to ensure that we're addressing and center is partnering with our local connections, respond to mental health crises. We need to ensure that students, I talk to a lot of first years, having 2 interns in Outdoor Senator, and one thing they also tell me is how inaccessible the food may be, whether it's because of their dietary restrictions or because of their allergies. We need to ensure that we're working with UCI Dining so that all of those resources are made accessible. Work with the Basic Needs Center to provide a
What would you propose to incorporate better access to basic needs resources? Candidate Gabriel may begin.
One thing that I think I've been saying for a while is, going to students where they're at. So many students that I talk to, I'm a political science and economics major, and so many students I talk to in the STEM they've never seen, or they've never even heard of. We need to ensure that we're going to those places and showcasing ASUCI, not just as a student government, but as a resource as well. What I plan to do is to partner with our Basic Needs Center to actually publish the Basic Needs Center, the Counseling Center, the Care Center, and every resource center to ensure that all students have ample access to the many resources that we have throughout this campus. I also plan to work with UCI Housing, not only to revitalize our infrastructure and education difficulties. Parking prices are rising, and just to get your education, you have to pay students, but that there's transparency when those prices rise. Over the past year, we've seen rising prices not an answer.
What would you propose to incorporate better access
of student affairs directly, as well as his head of staff. I ran it on the basis of academics, but I realized in my role this past year that there is so much inaccessibility that are things that I want to do or things that I plan to do next year, but they're things that I've actively been doing as we speak right now. I have been under the office of the president. I have been advocating how I could get that out for more opportunities for a student funding program similar to EBT for students that cannot get EBT, like commuters, RAs.
In addition to existing basic, candidate summer may begin.
On this campus, a lot of first years but essentially that is something that I would advocate to implement. Additionally, if in the case that put directly on how their money is being utilized, especially because it is something that everyone pays for, so students should be able to use their voice for it. Yeah.
What new resources or changes to those resources?
I think when it comes to working variety within the options there, I agree with Summer. Many students face dietary resources in collaboration with UCI Diet. Moreover, with the Basic Needs Center, what I plan to do is to develop a campus basic needs assessment so that we can understand the Moreover, we can also understand the clear center provides. Moreover, I plan to work with the UCI Care Center as well as UCI Transfer Resource Centers that many students benefit from, whether it's just understanding and seeing their logo, understanding that we are listening to them to advocate for the resources that they need as well.
Events on campus conclude, the president-elect will be invited to sit on the Joint Committee on the Budget, along with the current executives and other executive-elects.
Well, in many ways, this is a question that I think about a lot because this is something that I'm currently doing on the Student Fee Advisory Committee for UC Irvine, working with the provost and executives, working on the UC Council on Student Fees, and the board working alongside the Board of Regents to ensure that you're working alongside the Senate Finance Committee to manage and audit our budget to ensure that these financial decisions are being made in the interest of our student body. One thing that I want to do, maybe that hits close to home, is the African Black Coalition Conference. It's a wonderful opportunity for African Black students to advocate, to expand, to develop other similar events for other demographics as well, to ensure that every demographic is not only represented, but celebrated on our campus. One thing that I also plan to fund is our grant allocating commissions, ensure that they are given back into them.
At the beginning, or before my term even started, people that are paid in ASUCI got a pay cut is because I advocated for more money to be spent on resources for SPFB funding, for like RCO funding, and for the Anteater Safety Net Grant. I was there in the room making these decisions, and I plan to do the same. This past year, I've been able to, Resources Commission, which is my commission, where we hand out free stuff to students. All of that money is used for campus, for academic resources, for free green books. I've been able to work with the UCI libraries in funding their tech year. These utilize my town hall. I have been there.
A new significant change of the new comings. Candidate summer may begin.
This past year, I've served in the Constitutional Transition Committee, and essentially I do that. As well as anyone could, to be honest. With these new changes, I kind of is hard. That in turn, they're thinking that I can only do things for my school. There's less restriction. I think our internal processes organized, and I think that's something that
in the ASUCI Senate. And I've talked to our current school-based senators, and many of them agree. But more in the Senate as well, we can have a say within shaping campus policy. I've read the Constitution as a senator, and I've helped close the gaps between ASUCI and the student body, help effort to do so, to build those bridges, to open our doors for community. And that's what I've done not only as an at-large senator or within the ASUCI, but in working with university administration and listening to student experiences and perspectives and understanding the way.
How will you lead the association with the transition into the new constitution? For example, how will you help define and support the new enumerated rules, as well as promote them to the undergraduate student body? Candidate Gabriel.
Things that we can do for the students. So what I plan to do as a elected is to actually talk to every single elected officer to understand how they feel, the initiatives that they want to create for the students, and the ways in which together within ASUCI. Also, as ASUCI president, I plan to help manage the association alongside the internal and external vice presidents and the executive cabinet in general to ensure that every single student in ASUCI not only feels represented, but is heard. And doing that, working in tandem with university administration I believe that we can be the change that we want to see, implement the policy that we want to hear, and we can also put student voices to action.
You lead the association with the transition into the new constitution. For example, how will you define and support the new enumerated roles, as well as promote them to the undergraduate student body?
That for a lot of students, they don't really know what the new comms director to ensure that the message is across. What I've been doing actually before campaigning started was meeting with everyone that declared and working with them. I know it pretty well. I know it, but essentially I would just staff, whether it be paid staff or elective staff, especially because a lot of people that are running this year are new to the association. They are unaware of what power. We all sit down and just kind of ensure.
Thank you for your responses from each candidate.
But again,